I'll never forget the moment I found my grandfather's safe hanging open like a wound, empty except for the ghost of everything we'd lost. The cash, the jewelry. Those were just things. But the locket, my grandmother's locket, the only piece of her I had left, and the original deed to the first property Grandpa Arthur bought when he started his business 40 years ago, those were irreplaceable. Those were our family's soul. I heard the crash behind me. Grandpa had followed me into his study, and now he was clutching his chest, his face going pale as ash. He stumbled backward into his leather chair, the one he'd sat in every morning for decades, and I watched helplessly as the man who'd raised me after my parents died struggled to breathe. The paramedics said it was a mild heart attack. Mild. As if there was anything mild about watching your grandfather's heart break in real time because someone he trusted had betrayed him. If you're watching this, please hit that like button and subscribe because this story is about to get intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 3 months earlier, everything seemed fine on the surface. I was Alara Sterling, 28 years old, working as Grandpa Arthur's executive assistant at Sterling Properties, a commercial real estate firm that had survived 3 recessions and countless market downturns through sheer integrity and strategic vision. It wasn't nepotism that got me the job. I'd clawed my way through UCLA with a business degree, spent 2 grueling years at a cutthroat investment firm where I learned to read balance sheets in my sleep, then another 3 years at a boutique real estate consultancy in downtown LA. Only when Grandpa specifically called me into his corner office, overlooking Wilshire Boulevard, and asked me, with those steady gray eyes that had seen everything, to help him transition toward retirement, did I finally join the family company. I was being groomed to take over, and everyone knew it. My older sister Sarah had never shown the slightest interest in the business. Numbers bored her. Strategy meetings made her eyes glaze over. She'd dropped out of community college after 1 semester, declaring that traditional education was for people without vision. Instead, she'd reinvented herself as an influencer, posting carefully curated photos of her supposedly perfect life with her entrepreneur boyfriend, Damian Croft. Her Instagram feed was a highlight reel of bottomless brunches, sunset beach poses, and motivational quotes about manifestation and abundance. She had 70,000 followers who hung on her every filtered word. Sarah and I had never been close, not really. Growing up, she'd always been the golden child, the one who could light up a room just by walking into it. She had this effortless beauty, all long legs and perfect bone structure, the kind of face that made people do double takes. I was the serious one, the one buried in books, the one who actually cared about building something meaningful beyond a social media presence. The divide between us only deepened after our parents died in a car accident on the Pacific Coast Highway when I was 12 and she was 15. A drunk driver had crossed the median during a family trip to Big Sur. Mom and Dad were killed instantly. Sarah and I walked away with minor injuries, but the emotional scars ran deep. Grandpa Arthur took us both in without hesitation. He and Grandma had already lost their only son, my father, and now they became parents again in their 60s. Grandma passed away when I was 16, and after that, it was just the 3 of us. But while I tried to honor our parents' memory by working hard, getting good grades, making something of myself, Sarah seemed to think the world owed her everything on a silver platter. She cycled through jobs, boyfriends, and expensive hobbies. Grandpa paid for it all without complaint, hoping she'd eventually find her way. Still, she was my sister. Blood was blood. When she moved in with Damien 2 years ago, I genuinely tried to be happy for her. We'd met for lunch at some overpriced cafe in West Hollywood, and she'd been practically glowing as she showed me photos of him on her phone. He's an entrepreneur. She'd gushed. He's building something revolutionary. Damian Croft. Even now, saying his name leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. He ran a tech startup called Nexus Analytics, something vague about social media data mining and consumer behavior prediction. Whenever I asked him to explain exactly what his company did, his answers were always a word salad of buzzwords. We're leveraging AI-driven insights to optimize engagement metrics across multiple platforms, he'd say, flashing that practiced smile. It meant nothing. I'd seen enough pitch decks to recognize smoke and mirrors when I saw it. He drove a leased BMW M4, wore a Rolex that was probably fake, and treated Sarah to lavish dinners at Nobu and BOA Steakhouse, weekend getaways to Palm Springs and San Diego. On paper, he seemed successful. He had the right look, tall and conventionally handsome with carefully styled hair and designer stubble. He wore Tom Ford suits and carried himself with the kind of confidence that could convince investors to write checks. But something about him never sat right with me. Maybe it was the way his eyes would flicker with cold calculation whenever Grandpa mentioned business deals or property values. Or how he'd always steer conversations toward money, asking pointed questions about Sterling Properties' portfolio, our annual revenue, our investment strategy. He was too interested, too hungry, and not in a good way. I'd mentioned my concerns to Grandpa once, carefully, over coffee in his study. He'd listened, nodding slowly, then said, "I see what you see, Alara. But your sister is an adult. She has to make her own choices, even the wrong ones. We can't live her life for her." Grandpa Arthur was old school in the best possible way. He believed in handshake deals, in keeping your word, in the value of hard work and honest business practices. He also kept important documents and a significant amount of cash in a floor safe in his home study. He didn't trust banks completely, a holdover from growing up during the tail end of the Depression, watching his own father lose everything when a local bank collapsed. Always keep something liquid and close? He'd told me more than once, you never know when you'll need it. Only 3 people knew the combination to that safe. 8 numbers, a sequence that spelled out my grandmother's birthday in an old telephone keypad code. Grandpa, me, and Sarah. He'd given us the combination years ago, sitting us both down after Grandma's funeral and saying it was important that family know where everything was in case of emergency. If anything happens to me, you girls need to be able to access this. There's cash for immediate expenses, jewelry that belonged to your grandmother, and important papers. This is family security. I'd only opened it once, maybe 2 years ago, when Grandpa asked me to retrieve his will and some property deeds for a meeting with his attorney. The interior had been neat and organized, stacks of bills in bank wrappers, velvet jewelry boxes, manila folders with labels in Grandpa's careful handwriting. I'd gotten what he needed, closed it, and spun the dial. I never thought about it again, until that Tuesday morning in early September. The day started normally enough, unseasonably cool for LA, with that crisp quality to the air that hinted at autumn even though it was still technically summer. I arrived at Grandpa's Hancock Park house around 8 a.m., like I did every workday. It was a beautiful old Craftsman, built in the 1920 seconds, with a wraparound porch and mature trees that provided shade over the manicured lawn. I had my own key and usually let myself in, calling out a greeting as I headed to the kitchen where Grandpa would be waiting with the French press already brewing. We had a routine. Coffee together at the kitchen table, him with his Wall Street Journal, me with my laptop pulling up emails and the day's calendar. We'd review meetings, discuss properties we were considering, talk about market conditions. Then we'd drive to the office together in my sensible Honda Accord because Grandpa had given up driving 2 years ago after a minor fender bender. But that morning, something felt wrong the moment I pushed open the front door. The house was too quiet, no smell of coffee, no rustle of newspaper. No classical music playing softly from the study like there usually was. Instead, I heard Grandpa's voice from upstairs, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Stress, confusion, something darker. "Grandpa?" I called out, dropping my bag by the door and heading for the stairs. "Everything okay?" "Alara," his voice cracked slightly on my name. "Come up here, now." I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart starting to pound with that primal sense that something was very wrong. I found him standing in the doorway of his study, one hand braced against the doorframe like he needed it for support. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at something inside the room, his face pale, his jaw working like he was trying to form words but couldn't. "Grandpa, what is it?" I reached him, touched his arm. He felt cold despite the warmth of the morning. He just shook his head and stepped aside so I could see past him. The safe was open. Not just unlocked, but hanging open with the heavy steel door at an awkward angle, as if someone had yanked it wide in their hurry. It was built into the floor near his desk, usually covered by a decorative rug. The rug was pushed aside, bunched up against the bookshelf, and the safe, which should have been securely locked, was gaping like an open wound. I pushed past Grandpa and dropped to my knees beside it, looking inside with a growing sense of horror. Empty. Completely, devastatingly empty. The neat stacks of cash were gone. The velvet jewelry boxes were gone. The manila folders were gone. There was nothing left except the faint smell of old paper and metal, and a single rubber band that must have held some bills together, now lying forgotten in the corner. My hands were shaking as I reached in, as if touching the empty interior would somehow make this not real. Grandpa, when did you last open this? 2 weeks ago, maybe 3. I checked on some documents, made sure everything was in order. It was all there. All of it. His voice sounded hollow, decades older than it had been just yesterday. The cash, I expected. Grandpa kept about $50,000 in there, mostly hundreds, arranged in neat stacks and held with rubber bands. It was his emergency fund, his security blanket, money that could solve problems quickly if needed. The jewelry, those beautiful pieces that had belonged to my grandmother, her engagement ring with the square-cut diamond, her pearl necklace, her sapphire earrings, those were valuable too, worth maybe another 30 or 40,000 if you sold them to the right buyer. But it was the locket that made my hands shake so badly I had to press them against my thighs to steady them. My grandmother's silver locket, tarnished with age and worn smooth from decades of her touching it. It was engraved with tiny roses and opened to reveal 2 miniature photographs, one of her in her wedding dress, young and radiant, and one of Grandpa in his army uniform, handsome and serious. She'd worn it every single day until she died, tucked under her blouse so it rested against her heart. After the funeral, Grandpa had held it for a long moment, then carefully placed it in the safe. "This stays in the family," he'd said. "Someday, when you're ready, it's yours, Alara. You're most like her." I'd asked him about it just last month, mentioned that I'd love to have it when the time was right. He'd smiled, that soft smile that transformed his stern face into something gentle. "It's waiting for you," he'd said, just like she'd want. And now it was gone, stolen, ripped away from our family like my grandmother herself had been ripped away by cancer 10 years ago. And the deed, that yellowed, fragile piece of paper that represented everything Grandpa had built from nothing. His first real estate purchase, a small commercial building in Culver City bought in 1982 with every penny he'd saved, every dollar he'd borrowed, every ounce of faith he'd had in himself. That building had been the foundation of Sterling Properties. He'd renovated it, leased it, used the income to buy another property, then another. It was his origin story, his proof that an immigrant's grandson who'd worked construction to put himself through night school could build an empire through hard work and integrity. He'd framed a copy of that deed in his office, but the original lived in the safe. "Never forget where you came from," he'd told me once, showing me that yellowed paper with its careful notary seal and signatures. "Never forget that everything you have, someone worked for, someone sacrificed for, someone believed in." Those 2 items, the locket and the deed, they weren't just objects. They were our family's soul, our history, our connection to the people we'd loved and lost. And now they were gone. Probably pawned or destroyed or sitting in some pawn shop where no one would ever know their true value. That's when I heard the sound behind me. A gasp that wasn't quite a breath, strangled and terrible. I spun around just in time to see Grandpa grab at his chest, his face contorting in pain, his eyes going wide with shock and fear. His knees buckled, and he stumbled backward, his shoulder hitting the doorframe hard before he collapsed into his leather desk chair. "Grandpa!" I was on my feet instantly, grabbing for him, my hands finding his shoulders. His skin was gray, sheened with sudden sweat. His breath was coming in short, desperate gulps. "Stay with me. Just breathe. I'm calling 911. The next few hours were a nightmare blur, my fingers fumbling with my phone as I dialed. My voice, surprisingly steady, telling the dispatcher we needed an ambulance, giving the address, describing symptoms that I knew from every medical drama I'd ever seen meant heart attack. The operator's calm voice telling me to keep him comfortable, to loosen his collar, to stay on the line. The endless 7 minutes until I heard sirens, the paramedics rushing in with their equipment, their professional efficiency as they checked vitals and asked questions. The gurney, the ambulance, me following in my car, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, running red lights to keep up. The emergency room at Cedars-Sinai was controlled chaos. Doctors and nurses moving with purpose, machines beeping, that antiseptic smell that makes your stomach clench. They took him back immediately, wouldn't let me follow. I was left in a waiting room with CNN playing on a mounted TV and other people's tragedies unfolding in the chairs around me. 3 hours later, a doctor came out. Young, tired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Miss Sterling, your grandfather is stable. He suffered what we call a mild cardiac event, essentially a small heart attack brought on by extreme stress. The good news is that we caught it early, and the damage appears minimal. We've given him medication to stabilize his heart rhythm, and he's resting now. Can I see him?" "Soon. He's sleeping." The best thing for him right now is rest and keeping his stress levels down. Has anything particularly upsetting happened recently? I told him about the robbery. His expression darkened. That would certainly do it. At his age, with his medical history, he needs to avoid situations that spike his blood pressure and adrenaline. This kind of shock to the system, it's dangerous. They finally let me in to see him around 2 in the afternoon. He was in a private room, curtains drawn against the bright California sunshine, connected to monitors and IV lines that snaked up to bags of clear fluid. He looked small in that hospital bed, diminished in a way I'd never seen before. Grandpa Arthur had always been this towering figure in my life, strong and unshakable. Seeing him like this, vulnerable and frail, it broke something in me. I pulled a chair close to his bed and took his hand. It felt papery and cold. As I sat there, listening to the steady beep of his heart monitor, feeling the slight pressure of his fingers against mine, I felt something inside me fundamentally change. This wasn't just theft. This was an attack on my family. This was someone exploiting our trust, our love, and using it as a weapon to nearly kill the man who'd raised me. As far as I was concerned, whoever had done this had attempted murder, and I was going to make them pay. The police came around 3 p.m. Detective Morrison was a middle-aged man with a world-weary expression and a coffee stain on his tie. He was professional, took notes, asked all the right questions, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't particularly hopeful about solving this case. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints except those of household members because of course we'd all touched things in that study 1,000 times over the years. The security system hadn't been triggered. Whoever did this had walked in through an unlocked door or had their own key, known exactly where the safe was, and known the combination. Whoever did this knew the code, Detective Morrison said, stating what was painfully obvious. He looked at me over his notepad. Your grandfather mentioned that only 3 people had access. You, him, and your sister. Can you account for your whereabouts yesterday? I was at work all day. Sterling Properties, downtown. I can give you a list of people I met with. He nodded, making notes. And your sister? I don't know, we don't exactly keep tabs on each other. We'll need to speak with her. Get her statement, see if she noticed anything unusual recently. Sometimes these things, family members see warning signs before anyone else does. He paused, studying my face. You might want to think about who else has access to your grandfather's house. Keys, alarm codes, anyone who might have had the opportunity. I already knew. There were only 3 of us with the combination to the safe. Me, Grandpa, and Sarah. And I'd been with Grandpa all day yesterday, meeting with contractors about a renovation project in Marina del Rey, which left only one possibility. After Detective Morrison left, I sat back down in that uncomfortable vinyl chair beside Grandpa's bed and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I pulled up Sarah's contact and hit call. It rang, and went to voicemail. Hey, this is Sarah, leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can. Namaste. I tried Damien's phone next, straight to voicemail. His was more professional, probably recorded when he was still trying to sound like a legitimate businessman. You've reached Damien Croft, CEO of Nexus Analytics. Please leave a detailed message and I'll return your call. I sent texts to both of them. Grandpa's in the hospital. Call me immediately. Nothing. Not even the little dots that would show they were typing a response. For 6 hours, they were completely unreachable. I called repeatedly, left increasingly urgent messages, sent text after text. Nothing. It was like they'd fallen off the face of the earth. And with each passing hour, with each call that went unanswered, a cold certainty settled into my bones like ice forming from the inside out. They knew. They had to know. You don't suddenly become unreachable on the same day your grandfather gets robbed unless you have a very good reason to avoid answering questions. I stayed at the hospital, watching Grandpa sleep, listening to the rhythmic beep of monitors, and feeling rage build in my chest with every ignored call. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications. I barely noticed them. My whole world had narrowed to this room, and the desperate need to hear my sister's voice, to give her a chance to explain, even though I already knew in my gut that there was no innocent explanation. Then, around 4 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification. Instagram. Sarah had posted. My stomach dropped as I unlocked my phone and opened the app. It wasn't just one post. It was a whole carefully curated series, each one more devastating than the last. My hands started trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. The first photo showed Sarah standing in front of a brand new Audi Q7 SUV, pearl white and gleaming in the California sunshine, with an enormous red bow tied to the hood like something out of a luxury car commercial. She was wearing a designer sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, oversized Chanel sunglasses pushed up on her head, and she was laughing at the camera with that practiced influencer joy. The caption read, "Surprise from my amazing man. Dreams really do come true when you're with the right person. Number blessed, number new car, number surprise gift, number luxury life." I scrolled to the next photo, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Sarah and Damien standing in front of a massive Beverly Hills mansion, the kind with a circular driveway and towering palm trees, and an address that started with a 9-digit price tag. They were holding champagne glasses, toasting the camera, both grinning like they'd won the lottery. The caption read, "New beginnings, finally moving into our dream home. So grateful for this blessed life and this amazing journey. Number Beverly Hills, number dream home, number new chapter, number gratitude." The next several posts were a tour of the interior. Marble floors that looked like they belonged in a European palace, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the LA basin stretching to the ocean, a kitchen with professional-grade appliances, and an island bigger than my entire apartment. A living room with furniture that was definitely designer, all clean lines and neutral tones and that carefully casual elegance that screamed money. And in every photo, little details that made my blood boil. A glimpse of Damien's wrist wearing what looked like a new Rolex. A shot of the master bedroom with silk sheets and artwork that wasn't prints but actual originals in expensive frames. A photo of the backyard with an infinity pool and a view of downtown LA glittering in the distance. Then came the party photos. Their housewarming was in full swing, the house packed with people I recognized from LA's social media elite scene. Influencers I'd seen on Sarah's feed before, other wannabe entrepreneurs, beautiful people holding expensive drinks and posing for photos. Everyone looked like they were having the time of their lives. But it was the last photo that made me want to throw my phone across the room, to scream until my voice gave out. Sarah, radiant in a champagne-colored designer dress that hugged every curve, her hair and makeup absolutely perfect, wearing a diamond necklace I'd never seen before. It had to have cost tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. It was the kind of necklace you saw in jewelry store windows on Rodeo Drive, the kind that came with its own security guard. The diamonds caught the light and sparkled like captured stars against her collarbone. And she'd tagged me. Actually tagged me in the photo, like she wanted to make absolutely certain I saw this. The caption made my vision literally go red at the edges, made my jaw clench so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Some people spend their whole lives working, grinding away at the same boring routine. Others simply know they deserve more and aren't afraid to claim it. New chapter, new life, new me. Surrounded by amazing people who understand that success is a mindset. Forever grateful for this abundant life. Number blessed, number dream life, number worth it, number manifesting, number abundance mindset, number living my best life. The hashtag worth it, as if she was worth more than Grandpa's health, more than our family's legacy, more than basic human decency. As if she deserved the stolen life she'd built on our grandfather's suffering. The comments were already rolling in, hundreds of them. "You deserve this, queen. Manifesting this energy. Goals. So happy for you." Nobody knew. None of her followers had any idea that the car, the house, the necklace, the entire perfect life she was showing off had been bought with money stolen from an 83-year-old man currently lying in a hospital bed because his own granddaughter had betrayed him. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The hospital room felt too small, the walls pressing in. I looked at Grandpa, still sleeping peacefully because they had him on enough medication that he couldn't feel the pain of what had been done to him. And then back at my phone where Sarah was performing happiness for thousands of strangers while the man who'd raised her fought to recover from the shock of her betrayal. I stepped out into the hallway, my legs shaky, and called her again. This time, she picked up on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Like she'd been expecting this. "Alara, hey." Her voice was bright, cheerful, practically bubbling with excitement. "Did you see my posts? Isn't it amazing? I can't believe this is my life right now." For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't form words. The disconnect between her joy and my horror was so complete that it short-circuited my brain. Finally, I managed to say, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm, "Grandpa's in the hospital." There was a pause, just a beat. "What? Oh no, what happened?" Someone robbed his safe. He had a heart attack when he found it. He could have died, Sarah. He still could. My voice cracked on the last word. Oh my God, that's terrible. Is he okay? I mean, he's stable, right? The concern in her voice sounded so genuine, so perfectly calibrated, that for a split second, I doubted myself. But then I remembered that Sarah had always been a good actress. She'd been performing for cameras since she was 16. This was just another performance. The safe was opened with the code. Sarah. No one broke in. Someone who knew the combination walked in and took everything. What are you implying? Her tone shifted, cooler now, with an edge I recognized from 1,000 childhood arguments. Where did you get the money for all of this? I was trying to keep my voice level, trying to give her a chance to explain, even though I knew. God, I knew. The car, the house, that necklace? That's hundreds of thousands of dollars, Sarah. Where did it come from? She laughed, actually laughed, a bright, brittle sound that made me want to reach through the phone and shake her. Are you seriously accusing me right now? Are you actually standing there, at a time like this, and accusing your own sister of stealing from our grandfather? I'm asking where you got the money. Damien's company just closed a major investment round, Series B funding, $4 million from some venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. We've been planning this move for months, working toward this. Not that I need to explain my financial situation to you, but since you're apparently keeping tabs on me, there you go. Legitimate business success. Sorry if that's hard for you to understand. Sarah, please. I was begging now, and I hated myself for it. Just tell me the truth. Did you take the money from Grandpa's safe? The truth? Her voice dropped to something almost venomous, a tone I'd never heard from her before. The truth is that you've always been jealous of me, from the time we were kids. You couldn't stand that I was prettier, more popular, more fun. And you can't stand it now that I'm happy, that I'm successful, that I have everything you'll never have because you're too busy playing secretary to an old man and living a boring, pathetic little life. The words hit like physical blows. He's our grandfather. He raised us after Mom and Dad died. He took us in when he was already grieving his only son. He gave us everything. He raised you, she corrected, her voice sharp. He tolerated me. There's a difference. You were always his favorite, his little protege. I was just the disappointment, the one who wasn't serious enough, wasn't business-minded enough. You got the college fund, you got the job, you got everything. So excuse me if I don't feel too terrible about finally getting something for myself. This isn't about favorites, Sarah. This is about right and wrong. Right and wrong? She laughed again, harsh and bitter. Please, you want to talk about right and wrong? How about the fact that you've spent your entire adult life kissing up to an old man for his money? At least I'm honest about what I want. At least I'm not pretending to be noble while I wait for him to die so I can inherit everything. The accusation was so cruel, so deliberately calculated to hurt, that I felt tears spring to my eyes. I love him. He's my grandfather. I'm not with him for his money. I'm with him because he's family. Whatever helps you sleep at night, sis. I could hear voices in the background, laughter, music. Her party was still going on. While Grandpa was in the hospital, she was celebrating. Look, I don't know what happened to his safe, and honestly, I don't really care. Maybe he should have been more careful. Maybe he should have had a better security system. Or maybe he's just getting old and senile and forgot where he put things. Have you considered that? He's 83, Ilara. People that age, their minds go. Maybe he moved the money somewhere and forgot about it. The casual cruelty in her voice was like a slap across the face. This wasn't my sister. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too naive to see it all these years. Maybe the golden child I'd grown up with had always been this person underneath, and I'd been too desperate for family to acknowledge it. You know what, Ilara? I'm done with this conversation. I have guests to attend to. Some of us have actual lives, actual friends, actual joy. You should try it sometime instead of martyring yourself for someone who's going to die soon anyway and leave you with a bunch of properties and no idea how to enjoy life. Her voice turned saccharine, sweet, dripping with false sympathy. I really hope Grandpa feels better. Send him my love. Or don't. Whatever makes you feel like you're doing the right thing. She hung up. The line went dead, leaving me standing in a hospital hallway with my phone pressed to my ear and my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be having my own cardiac event. I stood there for a long moment, shaking with rage and grief and disbelief, hospital staff moving around me like I was a rock in a stream. Then I walked slowly back to Grandpa's room, sank into that uncomfortable chair, and looked at the man who'd given up his retirement years to raise two broken little girls who'd just lost their parents. He was still sleeping, his breathing steady, his face peaceful. He didn't know yet what Sarah had said. Didn't know that she'd called him senile, implied he was losing his mind, suggested his own granddaughter was only pretending to love him for inheritance money. That might hurt worse than the theft itself, knowing that someone he'd loved and provided for saw him as nothing more than an inconvenient old man in her way. As I sat there in Grandpa's hospital room, listening to the steady beep of his heart monitor, watching the sun slant through the window as afternoon turned to evening, I made a decision. A cold, clear decision that felt like stepping through a doorway into a different version of myself. I wasn't going to the police with suspicions and circumstantial evidence. Sarah would just deny everything, and Damien probably had lawyers who could tie up any investigation for years with motions and delays and legal maneuvering. By the time the legal system moved, if it moved at all, Grandpa might not even be alive to see justice done. He was 83. He'd just had a heart attack. Time wasn't on our side. No, this required a different approach. This required the kind of justice that didn't depend on courtrooms and reasonable doubt and overworked public defenders. This required me to become something I'd never been before. Something colder. Something harder. Something capable of making sure that Sarah and Damien paid for what they'd done, and paid in a way they'd never forget. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in almost 5 years. Leo Martinez. We'd dated briefly in college, a relationship that had burned bright and fizzled out when we realized we wanted different things from life. But we'd stayed friends, stayed in touch through occasional texts and even more occasional meetups for drinks. He'd gone into private investigation, the kind that dealt with corporate espionage and insurance fraud and things that existed in the gray areas between legal and not quite legal. I'd joked once that if I ever needed to find out if a boyfriend was cheating, I knew who to call. He'd laughed and said, "For you, Alara, I'd dig up anything." Time to take him up on that offer. I sent a text. "Leo, it's Alara Sterling. I need your help with something serious. Can we meet tomorrow?" The response came back within minutes. "Of course. What's going on?" "I'll explain in person. This isn't a conversation for text messages." "That sounds ominous. I'm intrigued. Tomorrow evening work? I know a place we can talk privately." "Perfect. Thank you." I put my phone away and looked at Grandpa again. He was starting to stir, his eyes moving behind closed lids, his fingers twitching slightly. Soon he'd wake up, and I'd have to tell him everything. About Sarah's posts, about the call, about what she'd said. It was going to break his heart all over again. But I'd also be able to tell him something else. That I wasn't going to let this go. That I was going to make sure Sarah and Damien paid for what they'd done. That justice, real justice, was coming for them, whether they were ready for it or not. I reached out and took his hand again, squeezing gently. "I've got you, Grandpa," I whispered. "I promise, I've got you." I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Leo? It's Alara Sterling. Remember you said if I ever needed anything? Well, I need something now." Leo Martinez and I had dated briefly in college. It hadn't worked out romantically, but we'd stayed friends. He'd gone into private investigation, the kind that dealt with corporate espionage and insurance fraud. He was good at finding things people wanted to stay hidden. We met the next evening at a bar in Santa Monica, the kind of place with dim lighting and high-backed booths that guaranteed privacy. I slid into the seat across from him and didn't waste time on pleasantries. I laid out everything. The theft, Sarah's sudden wealth, the timing, the Instagram posts. Leo listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back and studied me. "What exactly do you want from me, Alara?" "I want proof. I want to know where that money came from, how they're hiding it, and I want enough evidence to bury them both." "That's not cheap." I reached down and pulled up a briefcase I'd brought with me. I opened it on the table between us. Inside was $50,000 in cash, money I'd been saving for years. My entire nest egg. "This is everything I have. Is it enough?" Leo looked at the money, then at me. Something in my face must have convinced him because he nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But Alara, if I find what I think I'm going to find, this is going to get ugly. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It took Leo 3 days to crack the surface, and another week to dig deep enough to find the rot underneath. We met again at the same bar, and this time, he brought a laptop and a folder thick with documents. "Your sister's boyfriend is a piece of work," Leo started, pulling up bank statements on his screen. "Damien Croft runs a legitimate startup, barely. It's a shell company, basically. Very little real revenue, survives on investor money that he burns through on personal expenses. 3 months ago, he was about to go under. Then suddenly, he makes a cash deposit of $50,000. Cash, Alara. Who deposits cash in that amount anymore? The money from the safe. That's just the start. Look at this. He showed me a series of transactions. He used the cash as a down payment on the house and the car, structured the deposits to avoid triggering bank reporting requirements. Then, over the next few weeks, he moved another $200,000 through his company's accounts. $200,000? But there was only $50,000 in the safe. The jewelry. He sold it. I found the transactions. Went to 3 different jewelry stores, got cash for most of it, sold a few pieces to a fence I know of. Guy's smart enough to be careful, but not smart enough to cover all his tracks. And the locket? The deed? Leo's expression darkened. The deed, he's probably keeping as insurance, or he already sold it to a collector. Those original documents can be valuable to certain people. As for the locket, I don't know yet. Maybe he melted it down for the silver. I'm sorry, Alara. The thought of Grandma's locket being destroyed, melted into generic metal, made me feel physically ill, but I pushed past it. There would be time to grieve later. What about proof that Sarah was involved? That's trickier. Damien was careful to keep most of this in his name only. But I did find something interesting. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message exchange he'd recovered from Damien's cloud backup. Read this. The messages were between Sarah and Damien, dated the night before the theft. Sarah, he keeps everything in that safe. I'm talking serious cash and jewelry, plus some papers he says are valuable. Damien, you sure you can get the code? Sarah, baby, I've had it for years. He gave it to me and Alara ages ago. She's too much of a goody two-shoes to ever use it, but I'm not. Damien, when? Sarah, tomorrow. Alara's taking him to some doctor's appointment in the morning. They'll be gone for hours. The timestamp was devastating. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. They'd planned it. Sarah had deliberately waited until she knew Grandpa would be out of the house, until she knew I'd be with him, and she'd robbed her own grandfather. I looked up at Leo, and he must have seen something in my face because he reached across the table and gripped my hand. What do you want to do with this? I want them destroyed, I said quietly. Not arrested. Not sued. I want their entire life ripped apart the way they ripped apart ours. Can you help me do that? Leo was quiet for a long moment. That's not really my area. I find information. What you're talking about is revenge. Then call it justice. He studied me, and I held his gaze without flinching. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. We do this so that when it's over, they can't trace it back to you, and they'll be so buried they'll never climb back out. Over the next 2 weeks, Leo and I built our case like architects constructing a building designed to collapse. We didn't just gather evidence. We mapped out every vulnerability in Sarah and Damien's house of cards, every lie they'd told, every corner they'd cut, every rule they'd broken. Meanwhile, I played the part of the concerned sister. I visited Grandpa in the hospital every day, helped him with his physical therapy, reassured him that the police were doing everything they could. I even called Sarah a few times, keeping my voice neutral, pretending I believed her story about Damien's investment round. She ate it up, probably thought I was too stupid or too weak to see through her lies. The post continued. Sarah documented her new life with the obsessive detail of someone who needed the world to see how successful she was. Designer handbags, dinners at exclusive restaurants, a weekend trip to Vegas. Every post was another slap in the face, but I didn't react. I just saved screenshots of everything. Then, Leo called me with news that changed everything. They're throwing a party, next Friday. Some kind of launch event for Damien's company. He's trying to attract investors, show off his success. It's going to be at their new house, 100 people, catered, the works. And get this, they sent out a press release. They actually want media coverage. An idea formed in my mind, terrible and perfect. Can you get me an invitation? You want to crash your sister's party? I don't want to crash it. I want to make an entrance. The night of the party, I spent 3 hours getting ready. I wore a black dress that cost more than my rent, one I'd been saving for special occasions. My hair was perfect, my makeup flawless. I looked like old money, like someone who belonged in the world Sarah was trying so desperately to break into. Because here's the thing about real wealth, real class. It doesn't need to announce itself. I arrived at 8 p.m., right when the party was in full swing. The valet looked confused when I didn't have an invitation, but I slipped him a $100 bill and walked in like I owned the place. The house was packed with people holding champagne flutes and networking with the aggressive politeness of the LA social scene. I spotted Sarah immediately. She was holding court near the grand staircase, laughing at something a woman in a designer pantsuit had said. Then she saw me. The color drained from her face. I walked straight toward her, and the crowd seemed to part like water. People could sense something was about to happen. Sarah tried to recover, forcing a smile. "Alara, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. Then I looked around at the assembled guests. "This is quite the place you have here, Sarah. You and Damien must be so proud." "We are." She was trying to steer me away from the crowd, but I planted my feet. "It's funny, though. Just a few months ago, Damien was telling anyone who'd listen that his company was in trouble. Financial difficulties. I remember because Grandpa Arthur actually considered investing to help him out. Isn't it amazing how quickly things can turn around?" Sarah's smile was starting to crack. "Damien secured funding from other investors. It's called business." "Right, of course." I turned to the crowd, projecting my voice just enough. "Has anyone here actually looked into what Damien's company does? I mean, really looked?" Because I did. Very interesting business model. "Alara, stop." Sarah's voice was low, threatening. "Stop what? I'm just making conversation." Although speaking of business, Sarah, I love that necklace you're wearing. Is that new? It must have cost, what, 30,000? 40? That's more than most people make in a year. It's certainly more than Grandpa Arthur lost when his safe was robbed last month. The room went dead silent. Sarah's face was now bright red. "You need to leave. Now." "Why?" "I'm just getting started." I turned back to the crowd. Some people looked uncomfortable, but others were leaning in, hungry for drama. "See, my grandfather, Arthur Sterling, maybe some of you know him, he founded Sterling Properties 40 years ago, built it from nothing. He's 83 now, and last month, someone broke into his safe, took everything. The shock literally gave him a heart attack. He's still recovering." "Alara, I swear to God. The weird thing is, there was no forced entry. Whoever did it knew the combination. Only 3 people had that combination." I paused, letting that sink in. "And within hours of the robbery, my sister here and her boyfriend suddenly had enough cash to buy a house and a car and apparently a jewelry collection that would make Elizabeth Taylor jealous. Funny how that works out, isn't it?" That's when Damien appeared. He'd been in another room, probably schmoozing potential investors, but someone must have told him what was happening. He pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of righteous anger. "You need to leave. You're not welcome here. This is a private event." I turned to face him, and something in my expression must have been colder than I intended because he actually took a step back. "Private? You sent out a press release, Damien. You wanted attention. Well, congratulations. You're getting it. You're making baseless accusations." "Am I?" "Because I have bank records. I have text messages. I have receipts from jewelry stores where someone matching your description sold items that match the description of property stolen from my grandfather. Would you like me to share those with your potential investors?" The room erupted in whispers. Damien's face went from red to pale to red again. "You're lying. You're just jealous because Sarah chose me over your pathetic family." "Chose you over?" I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. "Damien, she chose your willingness to commit felony theft. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of your character." Sarah finally found her voice. "Everyone, please, my sister is having some kind of breakdown. She's been stressed about our grandfather's health and she's lashing out. This is all just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I pulled out my phone, where Leo had sent me everything. "I have text messages between you two planning the robbery. I have the dates, the times, everything. You want me to read them out loud?" For the first time, real fear flickered across Sarah's face. "You're bluffing. Try me." We stared at each other, and in that moment, I saw my sister clearly for the first time. Not the golden child, not the Instagram influencer, but a desperate, greedy woman who'd sold out her own family for a taste of luxury she hadn't earned. And I felt nothing. No love, no anger, just cold certainty. Damien tried one last time. "You can't prove anything." "Can't I? That's fine. I'm sure the IRS will be very interested in your cash deposits. They tend to ask questions about large amounts of cash appearing out of nowhere. And the police, they might want to revisit their investigation with some new leads. But you're right, I can't prove anything. I'm just a concerned citizen, making sure people know who they're doing business with." I turned and walked out before either of them could respond. Behind me, I heard the party devolving into chaos, people pulling out their phones, investors suddenly remembering other appointments they had to get to. I'd just blown up Sarah's perfect life in front of 100 witnesses, and it felt good. But I wasn't done, not even close. The next morning, Leo and I put the next phase of the plan into motion. Using the evidence we'd gathered, we filed an anonymous tip with the IRS about suspicious cash deposits and potential tax fraud. We also sent copies of everything to the California State Tax Board. Then, because we're thorough, we sent information to the Securities and Exchange Commission about Damien's company possibly defrauding investors. The response was faster than we expected. Within 48 hours, federal agents showed up at Sarah and Damien's house with search warrants. Their bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. The house, the cars, everything was suddenly tied up in legal red tape, but I still needed more. I needed them to lose everything, the way Grandpa had lost everything. That's when I learned about Julian Croft. Leo found him during his investigation. Julian was Damien's older brother, a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm. By all accounts, he was everything Damien wasn't. Principled, hardworking, respected. There'd been tension between the brothers for years, apparently. Julian had tried to warn people about Damien's schemes before, but family loyalty had kept him quiet. I arranged a meeting. Julian agreed, probably out of curiosity more than anything else. We met at his office, all glass and steel and expensive artwork. He was in his early 40s, graying at the temples, with tired eyes that suggested he'd been dealing with his brother's messes for a long time. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I laid out everything I knew. The theft, the money laundering through the startup, the fraud. I showed him the evidence. Then I sat back and waited. Julian was quiet for a long time, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at me. "What do you want from me?" "I want to destroy your brother's company. Legally. Completely. I want him to face consequences for what he did, and I want to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. He's my brother. He's a criminal, and if you don't help me, when this all comes out, and it will come out, the Croft family name is going to be dragged through the mud right alongside him. But if you help me, if you cooperate and provide inside information, you can spin this as the good brother turning in the bad one. You can be the hero who stopped a fraud before it hurt more people." Julian's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to betray my family. I'm asking you to choose between protecting a con artist and doing the right thing. Your brother stole from an 83-year-old man and gave him a heart attack. What do you think happens to the Croft name when that becomes public? When your law firm finds out you knew Damien was running a scam and said nothing?" That hit home. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the weight of his own reputation and career hanging in the balance. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly. "What do you need to know?" Over the next week, Julian provided everything. Names of Damien's other investors, evidence of other fraudulent activities, details about how the startup was structured to hide money. It turned out Damien had been running variations of this scam for years, just on a smaller scale. The theft from Grandpa was his big score, the one that was supposed to launch him into the legitimate business world. With Julian's help, we built an ironclad case. I hired a forensic accountant, a retired FBI agent who specialized in white-collar crime. Everything was documented, cross-referenced, verified. We created a timeline that showed exactly how the stolen money moved through Damien's accounts, how it was used to prop up a failing company and fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Then I made my move. Through a shell company I'd set up with Leo's help, I approached Damien about investing in his startup. He was desperate by this point, the federal investigations breathing down his neck, investors pulling out. He jumped at the chance. We set up meetings. I asked all the right questions, and I demanded a full financial audit as part of my due diligence. The audit took 2 weeks. Damien squirmed through every minute of it, knowing that we were uncovering everything but unable to stop it without admitting guilt. When the audit was complete, I had a third-party confirmation of everything we'd already discovered. Then I pulled my investment offer and sent the entire audit to the U.S. Attorney's Office. But the real coup de grace came from a different angle. Julian had told me that Damien's entire company was dependent on one major contract with a tech firm for data analytics. It was the only thing keeping the startup afloat, the only actual revenue stream they had. Lose that contract, and the whole house of cards would collapse immediately. Through a series of carefully orchestrated moves, using every connection the Sterling family had built over 40 years in business, I bought out Damien's client. It cost me every favor I'd ever been owed, and I had to convince Grandpa to put up some of Sterling Properties' assets as collateral. But I did it. I acquired a controlling interest in the tech firm. My first act as a board member was to cancel the contract with Damien's company, effective immediately. I made sure Damien got the news personally. I called him myself. Damien, it's Alara Sterling. I wanted to let you know that your contract with TechFlow Analytics has been terminated. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice that shook slightly, "What are you talking about?" "I'm on the board now. We decided your services weren't meeting our standards. The contract's been canceled. You'll receive formal notification by end of business today." "You can't do this." "I just did. Good luck with your business, Damien. I hear it's hard to run a company with no revenue and federal investigators going through your books." I hung up before he could respond. It was petty, maybe, but after everything he'd done, I'd earned a moment of pettiness. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Without the contract, Damien's company had no legitimate income. The investors who'd stuck around through the scandal finally pulled out. The company filed for bankruptcy within a week. Damien tried to sell off assets, but most of them were already seized or flagged by the IRS. Sarah and Damien's relationship imploded spectacularly. The stress, the money problems, the constant legal threats, they turned on each other. Sarah claimed she'd been manipulated, that she didn't know what Damien was really doing. Damien claimed Sarah had been the mastermind, that she'd given him the safe code and pressured him to rob her grandfather. They were both lying, of course, and the text messages proved it. One night, neighbors called the police after hearing screaming from their house. When officers arrived, they found Sarah with a bruised face and Damien drunk and raging. He was arrested for domestic violence. Sarah filed a restraining order. The perfect Instagram couple was now tabloid fodder, their dirty laundry aired for all to see. Then, 3 months after I'd found that open safe, Grandpa Arthur died. He'd been getting stronger, doing better, talking about returning to work. But one morning, he just didn't wake up. The doctors said it was a second heart attack, a larger one this time. His heart, already weakened by the first attack, just gave out. I found out later that he'd known that Sarah had stolen from him. He'd seen all the evidence I'd gathered, read the text messages, understood the betrayal. He'd told me he wanted me to handle it however I thought best, but I could see in his eyes that something in him had broken that could never be repaired. Sarah had stolen more than jewelry and cash. She'd stolen his faith in family, his belief that blood meant something. The funeral was small. Grandpa had been a private man, and he'd requested no big ceremony, just close friends and family. Sarah showed up. She had the audacity to show up, wearing black like she had any right to mourn him, like she hadn't killed him as surely as if she'd held a gun to his chest. She tried to approach me after the service. I watched her walk toward me, her eyes red from crying. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. She opened her mouth to speak, and I held up one hand. "Don't. Alara, please, I need to tell you. There's nothing you can say that will make any of this right. I made a mistake. I was desperate. Damien, he convinced me. Stop." My voice was ice. "You had a choice at every step. You chose to steal from our grandfather. You chose to give him a heart attack. You chose to flaunt it in our faces. You chose your boyfriend over your family. Those were your choices, Sarah. Own them." "I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for him to get hurt. I just wanted." "What? A nice house? A fancy car? Was it worth it? Was it worth killing the man who raised us?" She flinched like I'd struck her. "He died of a heart attack. I didn't." "You did. Maybe you didn't mean to, but you did, and now you get to live with that for the rest of your life." I turned to walk away, but she grabbed my arm. "Please, Alara, I have nothing left. Damien's gone. The house is being foreclosed. I'm being investigated by the IRS. I need help. You're my sister." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. "I was your sister. You gave that up when you robbed Grandpa. Now you're just someone I used to know." I pulled my arm free and walked to my car. She called after me, begging, but I didn't look back. A week after the funeral, Grandpa's lawyer read the will. I'd expected to split the estate with Sarah, despite everything. That's how these things usually went. Family is family, even when they're terrible. But Grandpa had updated his will shortly after the robbery. He'd left Sarah exactly $1, one single dollar, to make it clear she hadn't been forgotten, just rejected. Everything else came to me. Sterling Properties, the investment portfolio, the house, all of it. And there was a note, handwritten on his personal stationery. To Alara. "You've always understood that integrity isn't just a word, it's a way of life. Build something good. Make our family name mean something again, for the one who knows the value of honor. I read that note 3 times before I let myself cry. Grandpa had trusted me to carry on his legacy, to turn the ashes of what Sarah had destroyed into something meaningful. I wasn't going to let him down. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings. The U.S. Attorney's Office brought charges against Damien: fraud, theft, money laundering, and a handful of other counts I didn't fully understand. Julian testified against him, providing inside information that sealed the case. Sarah was also charged as an accessory, though her lawyers managed to argue for a lesser sentence if she cooperated. The trial was brutal. All the dirty details came out: the planning, the execution, the callousness of robbing a sick old man. Damien's lawyers tried to paint him as a struggling entrepreneur who'd made bad decisions under stress. The jury wasn't buying it. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Damien was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge made a point of noting the particularly egregious nature of targeting an elderly family member. Sarah, because she'd cooperated and because she had no prior record, got 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and a requirement to make restitution. She'd never be able to pay back what she took. Not in full, but the court ordered her wages garnished for the foreseeable future. I sat in the courtroom gallery and watched as they led Damien away. He'd been so confident, so arrogant at that party where I'd confronted him. Now he looked small, defeated, his expensive suit hanging loose like he'd lost weight. He didn't look at me as he passed, but I'd made sure he knew I was there. The most satisfying part came later. The Beverly Hills mansion was sold at auction. I bought it. Not because I wanted it, but because I wanted to control what happened to it. I had it completely renovated, stripped of every trace of Sarah and Damien's occupancy. Then I donated it to a nonprofit that provided transitional housing for victims of domestic violence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Audi was repossessed and sold. The jewelry Sarah hadn't already pawned was seized as proceeds of crime. Her Instagram account, once full of pictures of her glamorous life, went dark. Last I heard, she was working retail at a department store, living in a studio apartment in Van Nuys, checking in with her probation officer every week. The locket and the deed were never recovered. That still hurts, knowing those irreplaceable pieces of our family history are gone forever. But in a strange way, their absence became its own kind of monument. A reminder of what was lost, and why it mattered. I took over Sterling Properties and spent the first year just learning, rebuilding relationships Grandpa had cultivated, understanding the business from the inside out. Then I started to make changes. We shifted focus slightly, started investing in affordable housing projects and community development. I used part of the estate to establish the Arthur Sterling Foundation, a nonprofit that provided small business loans and mentorship to ethical entrepreneurs who were trying to build something legitimate. Every person who applied for a loan had to go through an extensive vetting process. We checked backgrounds, verified business plans, and most importantly, we assessed character. I wasn't interested in funding the next Damien Croft. I wanted to help people like Grandpa had been 50 years ago, hardworking and honest, just needing a chance. The foundation's first recipient was a woman named Maria Chen, who was starting a catering business after years of working in restaurant kitchens. Her loan was for $20,000, enough for equipment and initial operating costs. 5 years later, she's got 3 locations and employs 40 people. She sends me a Christmas card every year with a photo of her staff and a thank you note. That's what Grandpa's legacy should be. Not the money he accumulated, but the opportunity he created for others. I visit his grave every Sunday. It's on a hillside overlooking the city, with a view of downtown LA in the distance. The headstone is simple: Arthur Sterling, 1942 to 2025. Beloved grandfather, builder of dreams. I bring fresh flowers, usually lilies because those were his favorites, and I tell him about the foundation, about the people we've helped, about the business growing and thriving. Sometimes I think about Sarah. I don't hate her anymore. Hate requires too much energy, too much emotional investment, and she's not worth it. But I don't forgive her either. What she did was unforgivable. She made her choices, and she's living with the consequences. That's not cruelty. That's justice. Last week, I got a letter from her. It was forwarded through her probation officer, who apparently screens her mail. She wanted to know if we could talk, if there was any chance of rebuilding our relationship. She said she'd been going to therapy, working on herself, understanding why she'd made the choices she made. She said she wanted to make amends. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that conversation. But not now. Not when the wound is still fresh, when I still see Grandpa's face going pale as he looked at that empty safe. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand or schedule. It's something that happens when you're ready, if you're ever ready, and I'm not there yet. The foundation keeps growing. We've helped fund over 100 small businesses now. We've created jobs, revitalized neighborhoods, given people chances they wouldn't have had otherwise. And every time I sign off on a new loan, every time I meet an entrepreneur with a dream and the integrity to achieve it honestly, I think about Grandpa. About how he built something from nothing, how he valued honor over profit, how he believed that success meant something only if it was earned. Sarah wanted success without earning it. She wanted the Instagram lifestyle without the work. She thought she deserved luxury simply because she wanted it, and when she couldn't get it legitimately, she stole it from the one person who'd always supported her. That's the difference between us. I learned from Grandpa that nothing worth having comes easy, and nothing earned dishonestly is worth keeping. The Sterling name means something again in Los Angeles. Not just as a real estate company, but as a force for good. We're known for integrity, for community investment, for doing business the right way, even when the wrong way would be more profitable. That's Grandpa's real legacy, and no amount of stolen cash or jewelry could ever replace it. I think about what Sarah said at her trial, when she was begging for leniency. She claimed she'd been led astray, that she was sorry, that she wanted a chance to prove she could change. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe prison and probation have genuinely reformed her. But it doesn't change what she did. It doesn't bring Grandpa back. It doesn't undo the betrayal or erase the pain. What it does do is serve as a cautionary tale. About greed, about family, about the price of betrayal, about how one bad decision can cascade into a destroyed life. I tell this story to every entrepreneur who applies to the Sterling Foundation. Not to scare them, but to remind them that success built on lies is just a house of cards waiting to fall. Real success, lasting success, comes from doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, even when the wrong thing seems easier. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how hard I came down on Sarah, if I think I went too far in destroying her life so completely. The answer is no. She didn't just steal from Grandpa. She stole his peace of mind, his health, ultimately his life. She stole family heirlooms that could never be replaced. She stole a sense of security and trust. And she did it all without a second thought, flaunting her betrayal on social media like it was something to be proud of. I didn't destroy Sarah's life. She did that herself. I just made sure she couldn't get away with it. There's a difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about making someone suffer because you want them to hurt. Justice is about ensuring consequences match actions, about protecting others from the same harm, about saying that some things are not acceptable in a civilized society. What I did was justice. Cold, calculated, absolute justice. And I sleep just fine at night. The Sterling Foundation is my future now, my purpose. Every business we fund, every job we create, every life we improve, that's my way of honoring Grandpa. That's my way of proving that Sarah didn't win. She got money for a few months, sure. She got her Instagram moments and her fancy car. But I got something so much more valuable. I got to preserve and build on a legacy that actually means something: integrity, honor. The belief that how you achieve success matters just as much as success itself. Those are the values Grandpa instilled in me, and those are the values I'm passing on to every person the foundation helps. That's a legacy that lasts. That's a victory that matters. Sarah is working retail somewhere, checking in with her probation officer, living in a studio apartment, and probably posting inspirational quotes about resilience on whatever social media she's still allowed to use. Damien is in federal prison, his company dissolved, his reputation destroyed, his future a series of parole hearings and halfway houses. And me? I'm running a successful company, helping hundreds of people achieve their dreams legitimately, and sleeping soundly knowing I did right by the man who raised me. So yeah, I won. Not because I destroyed them, though I did, but because I built something better from the ashes of what they tried to tear down. Because I proved that integrity isn't just about avoiding the wrong path, it's about actively choosing the right one, again and again, even when it costs you. That's the real revenge. Not the trial, not the prison sentence, not the financial ruin. The real revenge is living well, building something meaningful, and knowing that while they're paying for their crimes, I'm creating opportunities for people who deserve them. The real revenge is turning their betrayal into my purpose. And if you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you. I know it's long, and I know it's dark in places, but I needed to tell it, because somewhere out there, someone else is dealing with betrayal from someone they trusted. Someone else is wondering if they should forgive or fight back. Someone else is trying to decide between keeping the peace and demanding justice. Here's what I want you to know. You get to set your own boundaries. You get to decide what's forgivable and what isn't. You get to choose whether maintaining a relationship is worth swallowing your hurt. And if you decide that it's not, if you decide that some betrayals are too deep to overlook, that doesn't make you vengeful or cruel. It makes you someone who knows their worth. Family doesn't get a free pass to destroy you just because you share DNA. Trust isn't a right, it's earned. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I believed Sarah when she laughed on the phone while Grandpa was in the hospital. I believed her when she flaunted her stolen wealth online. I believed her when she chose Damien over everything our family stood for. And I responded accordingly. No regrets, not one. So what would you have done? If someone you loved betrayed you like this, would you forgive them? Would you fight back? Would you burn their world down the way I did? Or would you take the high road and walk away? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about family, betrayal, and justice, because these stories matter. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles, and that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't about being petty, it's about refusing to let bad people win.